This experience should not be lost because of national discord on how to absorb this awakening. These people have offered themselves as targets to fight terrorism voluntarily. They must have the government's support. Tariq al-Hashimi, Iraqi Vice President.
Welcome back to Inside Iraq. We are discussing how 2007 will impact 2008 with Lawrence Butler and Scott Ritter. Ambassador Butler, next year, most probably the administration will start perhaps pulling a major portion of its U.S. troops. General Petraeus is on record that once he feels that this security improvement is sustainable, he will do that. Is this security sustainable, or this is a house of cards? As soon as 60,000, 70,000 American troops come home, we'll see again this chaos comes back again.
It's General Petraeus' take on JASM that as the Iraqi security forces are sufficiently trained to take over responsibility, as they have in 9 of Iraq's 18 provinces, then he'll redeploy. But very clearly we have the full intention, and he has the intention, of keeping U.S. troops in support of Iraqi security forces in what we call combat overwatch.
Well, I certainly hope it does. I mean, for the sake of the Iraqi people, et cetera. But again, I go back to my premise. We have a sucking chest wound in Iraq, and we've done nothing but put a superficial bandage on it. We haven't addressed the fundamental underlying problems. Sunni, Shia discontent, the problem with the Kurds in the north. What about the Iranians? We haven't mentioned them yet. You know, when 2007 started, we had talk about the Al-Quds force being the #1 problem America faced. We launched dramatic raids, captured these people. Now we're releasing them, saying they're of no intelligence value, no security value. We say that Iran is a problem, then we say Iran isn't a problem. Frankly speaking, I don't think the United States government knows what's actually happening on the ground. I keep hearing 9 out of 18 provinces. We throw out a lot of colory rhetoric, but the bottom line is there are fundamental problems in Iraq that lead to considerable violence. They have in the past, they will in the future, and they're not being addressed. They're being papered over with rhetoric, with flourishes.
Scott, if I can cut in on that one, look, the reality, I mean, the 4 things you just mentioned, the facts on the ground belie that. One, Al-Quds was a major problem for us in 2007, and they are a lot less of a problem today, as we've seen by attacks by Jaish al-Mahdi related and Iranian-provided EFPs have dropped off dramatically in the last couple of months. We are engaging Iran. We have a very robust process going up in the Kurdish areas. I mean, the reality is you've actually stitched together an outline and a backwards, and for some reason peculiarly pessimistic for end-of-the-year wrap-up of putting together all the threads of exactly how our policy for Iraq has been differentiated, which makes it very different than previous years. Will it be more successful? I don't use the word hope. Hope makes for lousy policy and planning. 2008 will be the year when Ryan Crocker takes the lead with his wingman, General Petraeus, in moving forward at the national level, at the same time as Petraeus and his folks and the provincial reconstruction teams work down at the provincial and lower neighborhood level. This is a complicated country going through a major revolution. We shouldn't be surprised that there is as much fragmentation as there is, but in this provides opportunity. It's no longer a sucking chest wound. I mean, I just reject that completely.
Look, I hope it works. I mean, like I said, hope is a good policy. You know, when I was in the Marine Corps, and that was a while back, you know, we weren't allowed to come to the table and put out problems unless we had solutions. And you know, I'm not someone who sits there and snipes at policy. But again, I need to point out that, you know, when we speak of the Sunni awakening, do we truly know what we're talking about here? I know the Marines have been in Anbar province working closely. We have provincial teams out there doing their job, but do we control them or do they control us? You know, the Iraqis are pretty good chess players on a chessboard of their own making, and I'm a little concerned that the United States has been in over its head for a number of years and continues to be.
Scott, I completely agree, and if there's anybody among the 3 of us who can address, you know, the Iraqis' ability to play 3-dimensional chess, is certainly you, based on your experience and what the Marines have done out in Anbar. We certainly don't control the Sunni tribes out there, and this is the whole point for counterinsurgency, which is now shifting over to the point of, you know, getting this country on the road to rebuilding itself. Something is going to emerge out of the West. We have seen contacts between Sunni and Shia tribes. Al-Maliki, who I would not be the one to say would be in love love with this particular movement, nonetheless has actually had his government commit several $100 million to employ the what we call the concerned local citizens, of these tribes members who stood up as neighborhood guards, some who come into the security forces, some who through General Petraeus and programs that we're working on together will begin this reintegration and transition to a civilian economy.
Ambassador Butler, let me stop you for just a second. Since you mentioned Jaish al-Mahdi and Muqtada al-Sadr, you are quite aware of the fact that the militias, they have moved southwards. There are daily running battles today in Basra, a few days ago in Amara and Samawa. Without the elimination of those militias, how can you run a civilized society? Right now, the battle has been suspended for a while, and unless al-Maliki declares those militias outlaws and unleash the Iraqi army after them, basically, these people, they can regroup and come back again.
There's always the danger of regrouping and coming back, but what you just described of unleashing the Iraqi army on, this is not how you persuade populations. Al-Maliki and his Minister of Defense and Chief of the Army are in the process of rebuilding from scratch an army which is capable of providing security and one that the civilian population can rely on. I think you will see David Kilcullen's ink spot theory spreading out as security is provided in more and more of the population areas. This is the success that we are building on to make it sustainable and to make it Iraqi-led. The key issue, Jasmine, on this one is it's got to be Iraqi-led. Now, whether it's led by the SAI, the Awakening Council out in Anbar, who are making alliances now with the Shia counterparts in the Karbala and other areas, or something else, it doesn't matter. As long as it's sustainable, as long as violence is down, as long as you see an economy growing and beginning to provide services to citizens.
Let us look to the future, Ambassador Butler. Scott Ritter, there were some sort of exchanges between the President Bush and al-Maliki in the form of letters about new principles about the future presence of U.S. troops in Iraq, away from the rigidity, perhaps, of the United Nations. How do you look at this? Is this, for the lack of better words, establishing bases by getting the Prime Minister to agree with it? This is some sort of a prolonged U.S. presence. How do you look at this?
Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge that the basis of the U.S. presence in Iraq today is an invasion of 2003 that's totally out of step with what we're trying to accomplish in 2008. And so there's an absolute requirement to go in and renegotiate, reevaluate, redefine what it is, what's the foundation of the American presence. If we continue to judge our presence in Iraq based upon the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, we will fail. So I applaud the effort to move forward. But there's another element you mentioned, or no one's mentioned so far. We've talked about the United States inside Iraq. What about Iraq inside the United States? What I mean is with the American people. We have an election coming up in 2008, and Iraq is one of the critical elements that defined this political season. We had the United States Congress, the Senate, pass a resolution saying Iraq should be divided into three separate entities, a Sunni state, a Shia state, a Kurdish state. The problem is we might have brave men and women on the ground in Iraq doing their job. We have fantastic people working their hearts out in the State Department, Ambassador Butler and others. But there's a disconnect between Iraq and the American domestic political imperative that could also be fatal. It's not just about addressing the government of Nouri al-Maliki. What are we doing about educating the American people, about getting Congress on board? And this is the fundamental effort.
These are hard-hitting questions, and they need long answers, which I don't have time for it. Scott Ritter, let me ask a final question to Ambassador Butler. Critics charge that all has happened so far was that administration poured a lot of money into the Anbar, into some of the hotspots. Basically, the insurgency has gone away by dollars. By the mighty dollar, the U.S. was able to subdue the country. As soon as that is evaporated, things will go back.
You don't extinguish insurgencies in Bosnia, Kosovo, or Iraq by pouring money on it. The Declaration of Principles that you referred to, the President signed with Prime Minister al-Maliki, it describes a way forward for us to to establish what is a mature long-term relationship that the United States will have with Iraq. One piece you didn't pick up on, which deserves just a quick second, is how about the neighbors' involvement with Iraq and vice versa? We talked about Iran, talked a little bit about Turkey. How about the Arab neighbors? We've had statements from the Saudis and the Kuwaitis that are going to open embassies. You've had the expanded neighbors process. 2007 was a year when Iraq started coming out of the isolation that it put itself into in 1990 with the invasion of Kuwait. The involvement at the Anbar area, clearly needs the development and needs a connection and a linkage which is sustainable, which there is trust between the Sunnis and a Shia-dominated government
We shall wait for that trust
this will take
come
time.
into line. Ambassador Butler, let me get a final response from Scott Ritter, less than 30 seconds.
Again, I go back to my original premise. Iraq has been a sucking chest wound for some time. I'm concerned that all we've done is papered over with American dollars. That this is a superficial treatment that doesn't have good connection between what's going on in Iraq and the political dynamic here at home, and I'm afraid that it's all going to come home to roost in 2008. I hope I'm wrong, and I wish the troops and Ambassador Butler the best of luck in trying to resolve a horrific situation inside Iraq.
Former UN Weapon Inspector Scott Ritter, Ambassador Lawrence Butler from the U.S. State Department. Gentlemen, thank you for being guests on Inside Iraq. To find more information about the show and to access it, please go to aljazeera.net/English. We have reached the end of this show. Join me next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Goodbye.